Hi there. Thanks for joining me again today. I want to continue this conversation we've been having about the Fourth Amendment. Now, last time we covered the difference between what would be an open field versus what would be curtilage, and that the curtilage is closer to the home, more intimate to the home, and I laid out four factors that a court would look at to determine, well, are we talking about curtilage that would be protected under the Fourth Amendment, or an open field that would not be protected under the Fourth Amendment. What I want to talk about today is, well, what about in scenarios where police officers or some kind of a government agency is looking at your curtilage, but they're doing it from like an airplane or a helicopter? And there are a couple cases that the Supreme Court has dealt with on this point. So one hypothetical that we can think about is, say that some government agency is flying in an airplane, and while they're up in that airplane, they look down at somebody's yard, and then they see some marijuana plants in the yard. And the police don't have a warrant to do this surveillance, but then they see these plants in the yard. And let's say that this isn't just in the yard, but certainly within the curtilage of the home. Would the police officers be allowed to use that evidence, their observations from the aircraft, the airplane, would they be able to use that in court? And the Supreme Court precedent that we have right now indicates that yes, the police officers would be allowed to do that in court, use that evidence in court. So let's change the hypothetical a little bit. Now, what if instead of airplane, they're in a helicopter? A helicopter, they can stay more stationary. They don't have to be moving like an airplane does. So if a helicopter is in navigable airspace, then they're just sitting right there and they're looking down. And let's even change it so that they're looking into somebody's greenhouse. They're looking through the roof of somebody's greenhouse and they see that there are marijuana plants inside the greenhouse. Are they allowed to use that evidence? And again, the greenhouse is within the curtilage of the property in this situation. Would they be allowed to use that evidence? And just like before, the Supreme Court precedent that we have indicates that yes, the government would be able to use that evidence in court, that that evidence is not prohibited under the Fourth Amendment, that does not count as a search. And part of the reason for this is, if anybody who's up in a helicopter or in an airplane could just look down and see that, well, how private and protected is it really? So if a police officer sees something like that, and anybody could see something like that in that situation, then why should the government have to just ignore it? So that's a very basic rundown of what are called aerial searches and whether or not those are protected under the Fourth Amendment. There are some situations where such aerial searches might be protected under the Fourth Amendment. Every single one of these cases is very fact specific, and the Supreme Court usually doesn't want to go outside of those individual situations. So as far as those hypotheticals that I said this time, the Supreme Court ruled that there was not an issue with those searches. In fact, they said that those aren't really searches because you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy when anybody who's up in the sky can look down and see what you have in that property. If the situation might have been different if the police officers were on the ground and then they couldn't see inside of the greenhouse, or they couldn't see what was in your curtilage of your home, so then they intruded into that area, then we might have a different situation. But with the aerial searches, the hypotheticals, as I said them before, not constitutionally protected. So again, this is a very small part of an overarching Fourth Amendment series that I'm hoping to continue. Please join into the next one. We're just building. These are small little building blocks. So I hope to see you next time. Thanks for joining me today.